Hey guys, tonight we drift into a night where the ocean sighs against the shore like a lover whispering secrets too old to name, and the air is thick with the scent of frangipani, sweat, and something older, mana. You're lying on a mat woven from pandanus leaves, your skin still warm from the sun and the salt, and someone you barely know is massaging crushed Thai leaf oil into your shoulders while softly humming a chant about star-crossed lovers who turned into twin islands. Somewhere in the distance, a conch shell moans through the dusk like the beginning of a dream you haven't decided whether to enjoy or survive. Because here's the thing. They believed sleep wasn't just a biological necessity. It was a ritual, a passage, a sensual theater where gods could flirt, ancestors could spy, and your soul could take off for an adventure your body was too shy to attempt. You probably won't survive this the way you survive a Netflix binge or a melatonin gummy. Because this sleep is alive, and it's not something you fall into. It's something you get invited to, seduced by. Sometimes tricked. Especially if you sleep with the wrong person, or the right one under a cursed moon. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, comment below where you're listening from and what time it is in your part of the world. Are you in bed? On a couch? Hiding from another soul-sucking Monday? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in the heart of ancient Polynesia now. Not the resort brochure kind, not the staged luau kind, but the kind where a carved wooden tiki stares down at you like it knows your secrets and isn't sure if it's amused or disappointed. This is a world where every moment is saturated with spirit, and sleep isn't a break. It's an appointment. It's where you rendezvous with dreams that might be messages or traps. It's where your ancestors may slip into your skin to whisper something important, something erotic, something disturbing, or maybe just to check if you remembered to keep the fire stoked. The air is wet with life. You can smell roasted breadfruit, the musky perfume of someone who just danced for 3 hours straight, and the fermented tang of kava, a drink that makes your tongue feel like velvet and your thoughts float like smoke from a sacred fire. Night falls like a silk robe sliding from a dancer's shoulder, slowly, intentionally, making sure you notice. You're surrounded by people who don't just accept sensuality, they enshrine it. It's stitched into chants, painted onto topicloth, pressed into tattoos. And when it comes to sleep, oh, you don't sleep alone unless you've messed up bad. Families, lovers, friends, and strangers curl up together under one thatched roof. Privacy is a foreign concept, one that arrived much later, wearing a starched collar and holding a Bible. Tonight's lullaby might be about war canoes or shellfish, but it might also be about how the chief's daughter snuck out to meet the shark god in human form, who took her in the lagoon and left her with gills. It's a lullaby with a beat, and your hips shift slightly without asking permission. Somewhere in a neighboring hut, a couple makes love, quietly, but not too quietly. This isn't shameful. It's a kind of applause for the life force. The others hear it, smile, maybe even get inspired. After all, sensuality is a communal thing here, not a private sin. Arousal is considered spiritual. Desire? A sign that the gods are still interested in you. Sleep here is rarely just unconsciousness. It's a mingling of souls and smells and breath, a letting go of the body not out of fatigue but out of trust. You lie back, your head on a rolled-up sarong, and watch the rafters overhead, darkened by years of smoke and secrets. You imagine all the stories they've seen. There's a shape carved into one post, maybe a turtle, maybe a phallus, maybe both. They often blurred the lines between the sacred and the sensual here. Everything touched everything. Sex touched sleep. Sleep touched the divine. The divine? Always watching, sometimes joining in. And yes, I know what you're thinking. Isn't this all a little much? Like, did people really believe their dreams were messages from ancestors? That sleeping with a certain person could alter the tide patterns? That chanting could influence fertility? Well, historians still argue whether these sleep rituals were literal or metaphorical, whether they truly believed in the erotic power of dreams or simply used it as an excuse for midnight mischief. But you know what? It doesn't matter. Because belief is reality when enough people share it. And in this humid, starlit world, belief was woven into the mosquito nets and carved into the driftwood. You close your eyes and hear a voice. Maybe it's someone next to you, maybe it's inside you. It's soft and rhythmic, telling you a story about a woman who married a spirit in a coconut grove, or a man who slept beside a volcano and woke up speaking bird language. The line between myth and memory here is paper thin, and the body doesn't know the difference. Let me tell you a real story now, a sensual one, pulled from a much later time but eerily resonant. Eleanor Herman, in Sex with Kings, tells of a Polynesian queen who used her sleep chamber as a political weapon. Every night she'd choose a different nobleman to share her mat, not because she was lonely or lustful, but because this way she could gather secrets, seal alliances, and make rivals jealous in one breathless move. The chamber wasn't just a bedroom, it was a throne room. That queen understood what Polynesians had known for generations. Sleep, sex, and strategy are often one and the same. And here's a fringe tidbit for you. In some Polynesian communities, certain plants were believed to influence your dreams' themes. Want to dream of a lost lover? Sleep with hibiscus tucked behind your ear. Hoping to banish nightmares? Rub noni fruit juice on your temples. Curious if your partner is cheating? Sleep apart and see if your dreams betray them. One village elder reportedly predicted a betrayal just from the way her granddaughter's foot twitched in sleep. You're beginning to drift now, aren't you? That's okay. Your body knows you're safe even though your spirit's about to go on a walk. Don't fight it. Just remember, the line between you and the gods gets fuzzy out here. You might wake up with a vision, or a lover, or both. And maybe, just maybe, your next dream will come with a chant you can't quite remember, but can never quite forget. You don't just lie down to sleep here. You arrive into sleep, like entering a ceremony, because the space you sleep in is no less sacred than a temple. The woven mat beneath you isn't just a mat, it's a platform of mana, that elusive Polynesian concept of spiritual energy, authority, and personal power. Your mat has been passed down, maybe cleaned with coconut husk and scented with crushed herbs, maybe whispered over by a priest before a big event. And above you, stars you can't name shimmer like ancient eyes, watching whether you respect the rituals that hold this night together. You breathe in, and the air is sweet, like ripe mangoes left too long in the sun, mixed with wood smoke and salt. And that's when you notice, the air doesn't just carry scent, it carries memory. The night hums with stories of other sleepers, other nights, other tangled bodies who left behind fragments of themselves in sighs, sweat, and dreams. Sleep here is never solitary. You sleep near others, curled up like spoons, breathing in unison, a chorus of lungs beneath a thatched roof. Lovers, elders, children, even pets. A heap of intimacy without the Western need for doors or walls. Everyone hears everyone else's dream cries, their soft mutterings, the way their feet twitch when they're chased by something in the dark. And no one's embarrassed, because dreams belong to the village. That communal rhythm is everything. Someone's grandmother might tap a rhythm on a wooden bowl as you drift off, not to wake you, but to guide your soul. Rhythms here matter. Whether it's the pounding of a pahu drum or the slap of waves against a canoe, Polynesians live and sleep by pulse. The rhythm of sleep is a dance of its own, measured, intentional, not something you crash into while doom scrolling. If your heartbeat gets out of sync with the group, a healer might notice. They might blow herbs over your chest, sing a calming chant, or even recommend a new sleeping position to realign your mana. Yes, sleep posture was part of spiritual hygiene. Lie wrong, and you risk confusing your ancestors. lie right, and you invite them to whisper secrets straight into your dreams. And here's where things get a little blurry. Because in many Polynesian beliefs, sleep is not just about rest, it's about crossing. Your soul detaches slightly from your body and floats out, seeking advice, encountering gods, or just eavesdropping on a lover. If you've been faithful, the gods might send you a sexy dream as a reward. If not, you might wake up with a mysterious rash or a chicken that refuses to lay eggs. People took these signs seriously. Which brings us to the sex story of the night, one that drips with the kind of casual power only the royals could wield. From Peter Webb's The Erotic Spirit Through History, we learn about a Polynesian chiefess who would perform a nightly ritual of spiritual cleansing by selecting a new lover to share her mat, not out of desire, but to absorb his energy and redistribute it through chants at dawn. The chosen man was expected to bathe, oil his skin, and sometimes even shave his body with shark teeth blades before arriving. This wasn't seduction, it was service. The act was both a celebration and a sacrifice. Some men bragged about being chosen, others prayed they wouldn't be, fearing they'd be drained of vitality. Historians still argue whether this was more religious or political. Was she a priestess in action, or just a queen having fun? Either way, the line was delightfully blurred. And while we're here, a strange tidbit. Some tribes believe that certain dreams had taste. Not metaphorically, literally. If you dreamt of ripe bananas, you might wake up with a sugary tang on your tongue. Dream of ocean storms, and your mouth might taste like salt and metal. Children were taught to describe the taste of their dreams to elders, who'd interpret the flavor as either a blessing or a warning. No one questioned this. Why would they? Taste, like touch, was another way to speak to the divine. Tonight, as you lie still, eyes half closed, you hear someone whispering a sleep chant, not to you, but near you. It's in a language you don't recognize, but the cadence is so familiar, it feels like a lullaby from your earliest memory. You don't need to understand it. Your body already does. The chant invokes winds, tides, hips, and heat. It thanks the ancestors for the touch of the day and asks them to bless the touch of the night. And suddenly you realize, sleep here isn't just a passive thing, it's a performance, a rite of passage, a conversation. That's why they believed in mana, because sleep was where it concentrated. A good dream could mean you're full of it. A nightmare? Mana imbalance. Sleep too long? Risk spiritual laziness. Don't sleep enough? You'll be out of rhythm with the gods. And the worst fate of all? Dreaming of nothing. That was seen as an emptiness, a lack of favor, a spiritual cold shoulder from the universe. You didn't just wake up groggy, you woke up haunted. So people worked hard at sleep. They prepped for it like warriors, bathed in river water mixed with ginger root, oiled their hair, smoked calming herbs, avoided certain foods after dark, especially sour ones, which were said to attract angry spirits. They adjusted who they lay next to, because yes, your bedmate affected your dreams. Sleep was chemistry. Lie next to a bitter soul, and you'd taste ash in your dreams. Lie next to someone joyful? You might dream of flying pigs and rainbow fish. That's not a joke. Flying pigs were a dream motif among some Pacific Islanders, usually signaling abundance or fertility. Weird? Sure. But it made sense in a place where the line between animal, human, and divine was drawn in coconut ash and easily smudged. Your body shifts again, caught in that moment before true sleep, and something cool touches your ankle. A breeze? A spirit? The tail of a curious lizard? You don't panic. You're learning not to. In this world, unexpected touches in the dark are just part of the spiritual ecosystem. You welcome them, or pretend to. And as you finally feel yourself falling, you think of one last image. A tattooed elder, eyes closed, lips smiling, dreaming on a mat beside you. You don't know what she's dreaming of, but you swear she just whispered your name. You wake not with a jolt, but with the kind of slow-motion clarity that feels like a memory you didn't know belonged to you. Morning hasn't arrived. It's just another hour in the heavy, velvet dark, where time droops like overripe fruit and sleep folds in on itself like a well-worn tapa-cloth. Your body is still somewhere in that liminal space between rest and readiness, but your senses are alive, especially your nose. Something sweet hangs in the air, a perfume that almost makes your teeth ache. It's plumeria, maybe, or crushed hibiscus rubbed into the pulse points of someone sleeping too close to you to be just resting. Aromas were more than smells here. They were messages, flirtations, even weather forecasts for your romantic prospects. A Polynesian woman might wear a garland of gardenia not just to look pretty, but to signal that her body was ready to receive a visitor, in her dreams or otherwise. A man might sleep with a bit of turmeric behind his ear if he wanted his nighttime visions to reveal the face of his future lover. You roll slightly and catch a glance. She's sleeping with her face tilted toward the ceiling, mouth slightly open, eyes darting under lids like she's chasing something slippery in her dreams. The flower behind her ear is wilting. That means the invitation was already accepted. Polynesians understood that the body was a billboard for the sensual world, and nowhere was this more true than at night. Skin mattered. Sweat wasn't hidden. It was celebrated. Glossy limbs were admired like polished wood carvings. You didn't bathe to erase scent. You bathed to reset it. Coconut oil mixed with sea salt was the base of many love potions. And there were songs, long melodic chants you'd murmur while anointing your body, each verse dedicated to a different limb. Left arm for strength, right thigh for seduction, belly for fertility, lips for lies or truths, depending on the night. One of the most intriguing customs involved something we might call erotic forecasting. That is, sleep-based seduction rituals designed to predict whether a lover would return, whether a marriage would last, or whether the gods approved of your latest crush. You'd light a piece of sandalwood bark and place it near the head of your mat. If the smoke curled clockwise, your lover was thinking of you. If it drifted toward the sea, you'd been forgotten. Some took it further, brewing tea from rare petals and sipping it just before sleep, hoping for a vision of union, or at least closure. And yes, dreams were full of signs. Broken canoes meant betrayal. Laughing dolphins meant passion. A shark brushing your calf in a dream? Jealousy. Intense jealousy. Probably theirs, possibly yours. No one laughed these off. You'd wake up and tell your dream to the village elder over morning breadfruit, and she'd nod solemnly, assign meaning, maybe even stage a small ritual to balance the emotional current. And speaking of emotional currents, time for tonight's true tale of sensual intrigue. In Michel Foucault's writings on the history of sexuality, there's an obscure reference to a South Pacific legend involving a high priest who would select dream mates from among the villagers. He'd appear in their dreams wearing a mask shaped like a nautilus shell. If you responded well, meaning sensually but not greedily, you'd be blessed with fertility or wisdom. But if you tried to dominate the dream, to turn it into your fantasy, you'd wake up with night sweats for weeks and an inability to speak for 3 days. People didn't fear this priest. They craved his visit. Being chosen meant you were seen, desired, worthy. The sensual in Polynesia was never just about bodies. It was about power, spirit, and reciprocity, even in dreams. But here's something odd, a fringe detail most textbooks skip. In some smaller island communities, it was believed that lovers could plant a dream in someone else's sleep, like dream mail. You'd whisper your story into a shell, seal it with saliva, and place it under their sleeping mat. In the morning, if they'd dreamt of anything similar, it meant your souls were connected. If not, the shell was cracked and tossed into the ocean. No hard feelings. just bad reception. That blending of sensuality, mystery, and sleep was everywhere. Even children knew the rules. Parents didn't hide affection. In fact, a common bedtime routine included lullabies that sounded suspiciously like romantic poetry. Take this line from a traditional chant. "My arms are open like the breadfruit tree. Come rest, come nest, come be my breeze." Sweet, right? Until you realize the breeze is a metaphor for, well, use your imagination. That's how layered things were. The erotic and the innocent shared space here. Desire was a part of life, not a detour from it. Elders told stories of goddesses who slept with mortals not as punishment, but as reward. Of demigods born from a single night beneath a banyan tree. They whispered these tales over kava, smiling like they knew more than they were saying. The young listened, blushing but curious, knowing that their time would come. This wasn't a culture of repression, it was a culture of preparation. You didn't hide from desire. You trained for it, the way you trained for voyaging or dancing or warfare. And part of that training happened in your dreams. So yes, aromas mattered, not just as sensory pleasures, but as tools. You used scent to coax your body toward dreams, sandalwood for seduction, ylang ylang for clarity. Sometimes even rotting fruit was used. Fermented papaya was believed to spark dreams about transformation. Gross? Maybe. But effective, reportedly. And if you woke up too quickly from one of these dreams, there was a chant for that too. A kind of rewind incantation you could whisper into your pillow to try and slip back into the story. Not always successful, but worth a try, especially if the dream was heating up. And it wasn't just about individual experience. Couples engaged in synchronized sleep rituals. Before lying down, they'd press foreheads, inhale each other's breath 3 times, and recite a shared chant. The goal? To dream the same dream. Did it work? Historians still argue whether these accounts were literal or symbolic, but the fact that people believed it worked tells you everything. Sleep was a shared landscape. You weren't just resting, you were traveling. Together. And what if one of you had a bad dream? Then you shared that too. You'd wake up, describe it in detail, and your partner would interpret it, often turning fear into intimacy. You dreamt I drowned? Then I must cling tighter to you tonight. That kind of thing. Sleep here didn't divide people, it bound them. The idea of sleeping apart was a punishment, a way to signal spiritual disconnection. So as you drift again, as the scent of crushed blossoms lingers in your nose, and the faint notes of another chant melt into the dark, you realize this isn't just sleep, it's storytelling, and the story is being written on your skin. You ever wake up in a room that's too quiet, like the silence itself is pressing against your ears, trying to tell you something's off? Now imagine waking up in a world where that silence isn't empty. It's waiting, it's breathing, it's got eyes. You're not just waking up from sleep, you're waking up into something. You sit up slowly, the mat's pattern imprinted across your skin, and you feel the weight of something unspoken. Outside, the night hasn't lifted. The stars are still smeared across the sky like wet paint, and the sea hushes in slow, patient sighs. Someone is watching you, or something. And that's when you remember. You're not just anybody tonight. You're Ali'i, Polynesian royalty. And the rules of sleep don't apply to you the same way they do to everyone else. Because your dreams, they're political. Your sleep chamber, it's a battleground dressed as a love nest. When you're Ali'i, your bedtime rituals aren't just for comfort, they're for ceremony, spectacle, and sometimes straight-up strategy. That bed you're lying on? It might be handmade by 10 different artisans, each weaving their prayers into every fiber. The sheets are softened bark cloth. The scent of orchid oil clings to the corners, and there's a carved wooden bowl beside your head filled with water to reflect your dreams back at you, if you're brave enough to look. And beside the bed? Not one, but two attendants, silently fanning you with palm leaves, not because it's hot, but because that's how you keep away the wrong spirits. You don't just sleep when you're royalty. You stage sleep like a ritual performance. There might be watchers. There might be priests. There might be a concubine whose job is to keep your body warm, but not touch you unless the gods give a sign. It's theater, it's politics, it's sensuality laced with danger. One wrong movement in this room and your entire village could interpret it as a cosmic omen. But you're used to that kind of pressure, aren't you? You roll to your side, eyes half closed, and observe the shadows on the wall, dancing just slightly, flickering with the low oil lamp glow. Those shadows have stories. That one? Probably the ghost of an ancestor. The other? Could be your rival's spy, here to see who shares your bed tonight. And speaking of shared beds, let's talk about that. Because Ali'i didn't sleep alone. They didn't have to. Sometimes their lovers were chosen by priests, sometimes by dreams, sometimes by sheer impulse at a festival feast after one too many bowls of kava. But once they were chosen, those lovers entered a strange kind of orbit. Not quite power, not quite servitude. To share the mat of an Ali'i was to step into firelight and become part of the myth. And these liaisons? They weren't always kept behind closed doors. In fact, in many places, sex wasn't hidden. It was witnessed. Not pornographically, but spiritually. The belief was that certain couplings enhanced mana, not just for the lovers, but for the entire community. So yes, there were sanctioned performances. Sensual acts accompanied by chants, flower offerings, and rhythmic drums. Not everyone could participate. You had to be chosen, prepared, worthy. And those not participating? They watched. They learned. They carried the energy home like embers in their mouths. This might sound shocking, even impossible. But historians still argue whether these accounts, collected by stunned colonial observers, many of whom clutched their Bibles with white knuckles, were literal truths or exaggerated fantasy. Either way, the cultural logic holds. When sex is sacred and sleep is a ceremony, why wouldn't the two mingle in spectacle? But here's the twist. Not all royal sleep was pleasure. Sometimes it was prison. If you were Ali'i and believed to be spiritually tainted, maybe you dreamt of the wrong god or kissed someone below your caste, you could be sentenced to sleep alone. For weeks, in a cold hut, no flowers, no songs, just you, your guilt, and the rustle of rats judging you from the corners. The logic was brutal. Your dreams could infect the tribe. So until they cleared, you were quarantined. Some never returned to normal sleep again. But then, of course, there were the indulgences. Let me tell you about one queen whose bedtime habits made Eleanor Herman's Sex with Kings look like a sleepover. She'd host midnight listening sessions, where musicians played lullabies tailored to her current mood, jealousy, rage, arousal, or even just vague existential longing. After the music, she'd lie on her mat and let a different nobleman each night whisper a dream into her ear. Just the dream. Nothing physical. Whoever's dream stirred her spirit the most got to sleep beside her. Not touch, just lie beside her. That alone was enough to launch political careers or destroy them. Some say she never actually slept with anyone in the physical sense. She let them dream for her. Her body stayed untouched. Her power, untouchable. And then there's the odd little nugget that barely made it into anthropological texts. Apparently some Ali'i slept surrounded by symbolic objects. Turtle shells for protection, pig teeth for fertility, dried seahorses for dream control. It's said one chief even kept a petrified bird tongue under his pillow to ensure eloquence in dreams, so he could impress the gods with bedtime speeches. Real or myth? Again, historians argue. But the idea that dreams were auditions for the divine? That was very real. Even more bizarre. One account describes a royal custom where enemies, once defeated, were required to sleep in the ali'i's chambers for one night as a gesture of humiliation and reconciliation. Imagine that. The same person who tried to overthrow you now curled at your feet, dreaming on your sacred mat. It wasn't just about dominance. It was about turning sleep into diplomacy, an uncomfortable kind, one where nightmares probably came with a side of political regret. You're still lying there, half dreaming yourself, and the images flicker like a film reel behind your eyes. Warriors sleeping beside priestesses, queens tangled with spirits, conch shells moaning in the night wind. It's all so tactile, so humid, so alive. And then, almost like a closing note, you hear a voice outside the hut. A chant, slow and deliberate. It's a warning, maybe, or a lullaby, or both. It tells of a time when an ali'i fell asleep too deeply, traveled too far in a dream, and never woke. His body stayed breathing, but his spirit? Gone. They say the wind still carries his sighs if you sleep too close to certain cliffs. So tonight, if you feel yourself slipping too far, call your name 3 times into your pillow. That might bring you back, or it might call something else forward. Sleep well, Your Highness. You're lying there, body warm, breath slowed, and just as your mind begins to drift into that syrupy in-between space where dreams like to sneak in, you hear it, a single note, hummed from someone's throat, rising through the air like steam from a volcanic vent. It's not a song, it's a signal that tonight something is about to happen, something both ancient and intimate, something that would have made your high school health teacher faint. Because in this world, sex wasn't hidden behind euphemism or shame. It wasn't something you discussed when you're older. It was folded into the very fabric of sleep, spirit, and survival. You don't fall into bed hoping no one hears. You fall into it with the understanding that your body isn't just a machine, it's a sacred conduit. In some parts of Polynesia, sex wasn't just permitted, it was expected, especially before sleep, especially as a ritual. Imagine this. A couple kneels together, foreheads pressed, whispering the names of their ancestors. Not as a formality, but because they believe the dead are watching, listening, and, in some mysterious way, blessing the act about to unfold. The couple then anoints each other, not with candlelit mood music, but with oils infused with ginger, ylang-ylang, and crushed sandalwood bark. These weren't just fragrances, they were offerings. The scent was meant to invite gods of fertility, of protection, of dream travel, because to them, sex wasn't private. It was profoundly public, even if only spiritually. Your body was the altar. Your breath was the chant. Your orgasm? That was thunder, meant to echo through both realms, waking the ancestors and shaking loose the spirits of illness or misfortune. Sound intense? It was, but also tender. Because here, the emotional and the physical weren't rivals. They were married. And before we drift deeper, let me gift you a true story pulled from the vivid pages of The Erotic Spirit Through History, a tale of a high-ranking Polynesian priestess who performed what we'd now call a fertility blessing. But it wasn't a hand wave and a prayer. No. She'd lie beside a hopeful mother-to-be, matching her breathing, touching her gently at each chakra point, whispering into her navel as though it were a listening ear. Then the priestess would sleep beside her, with her if she felt it necessary, transferring energy from one womb to another. It wasn't sexual in the way we'd label it. It was sexual in a cosmic sense. Sensuality, here, had jobs to do. Fertilize the land, heal the sick, strengthen the soul. Sex wasn't recreation. It was infrastructure. And it didn't always require physical contact. Some rituals invoked sleep lovers, beings you would summon into your dreams. They might arrive in animal form, like a sleek dolphin who spoke with your uncle's voice, or as shimmering human shapes who knew your body better than you did. These weren't demons or ghosts. They were companions, woven from spirit and desire. And you didn't feel guilt waking up aroused. You felt chosen. Of course, there were rules. You couldn't summon them more than 3 nights in a row, or they'd grow jealous and follow you into the waking world. If that happened, you might find your food spoiling too fast, or your clothes mysteriously damp each morning. Subtle signs that you'd blurred the lines between dream and duty. Historians still argue whether these practices were literal, metaphorical, or deeply theatrical. Some insist it was all symbolic, a way to make sense of longing. Others are convinced the Polynesians understood something about consciousness that we've forgotten. Either way, it worked. Because people believed. And belief, as always, shapes biology. Let's not forget how kids were introduced to this culture of open sensuality. Not through lectures. Through observation. Children slept with their parents. They heard, saw, absorbed. There were no squeamish metaphors. No awkward talks over spaghetti. Instead, sex was modeled as connection, not conquest. If a child had questions, they asked. If they had dreams, they shared them. Shame wasn't taught. Awareness was. That's why, in some traditions, adolescents were encouraged to explore sensual dreams as part of their growth. One ritual involved a young person choosing a flower, whispering their wish into it, and placing it under their pillow. If the flower remained fragrant the next morning, their desire was blessed. If it wilted, they were to wait. Simple, sensible, and strangely beautiful. Want a fringe tidbit? There's at least one island group where night visitors were considered normal. Not scary, but expected. If you were particularly attractive or had strong mana, you might receive more than one visitor per night. Some said you could smell them before they arrived, a scent like wet earth mixed with crushed mint. Others said they'd kiss your eyelids, then leave without a word. They were part of the ecosystem. You didn't fear them. You thanked them. Which brings us to tonight's stranger tale, one catalogued in fragments by Foucault, a legendary figure known only as the Sleeper Wife. She was a young woman who fell asleep every night in a communal hut and somehow managed to visit different men in their dreams. They all described her the same way: warm skin, jasmine breath, laughter like rain on a tin roof. But here's the twist. When questioned, she remembered none of it. Not a single dream. Yet she woke up radiant, nourished. Some said she was possessed. Others claimed she was a dream priestess without training. The truth? Probably unknowable. But even now, old women still whisper her name to their pillows in hopes she'll visit. That's the kind of myth sleep was born from. And yes, sleep here had its shadows. It wasn't all perfumed flirtation and flower-scented sheets. If you betrayed a lover or broke a sleep pact, say by dreaming of another when you were bonded, you could find yourself cursed. Not with boils or snakes, but with loneliness. No dreams, no visitors, just empty dark. They called it the silent mat. A sleep so blank, it left people weeping. You might laugh, but imagine never dreaming again. Imagine closing your eyes and hearing nothing, feeling nothing, not even your own weight. That's what they feared, not death, emptiness. So they honored sleep. They prepared for it with the same reverence you might bring to a shrine. You didn't just crawl into bed, you cleaned your body, you calmed your mind. You spoke gratitude aloud. You kissed your own wrists. Because if you were lucky, tonight would bring a dream worth remembering. And maybe, if the gods were in a good mood, someone to share it with. You're somewhere deep now, deeper than you've ever gone in sleep, drifting past the edge of dreams into a space where everything pulses, not with time, but with intention. This isn't your average REM cycle. Here you don't dream because your brain is sorting out grocery lists and breakup playlists. You dream because your body is a compass and your spirit is on a mission. And here's the twist. Everyone's watching. Not with judgment, with interest. Because dreams in ancient Polynesia weren't yours alone. They belonged to the whole village. Your dreams could predict the weather, signal danger, inspire rituals, even determine who you'd marry, or if you'd be exiled. So when you roll over on that sleep mat and sigh in your sleep, someone nearby might lean in just a little. Because what you're dreaming could matter. A lot. Especially if you're someone of status, or someone whose mana is known to ripple through the community. Dreams were divinatory, but they were also deliciously sensual. The boundary between what was physical and what was spiritual didn't just blur, it danced. You might dream of the sea goddess coming to kiss your feet, her lips cold as coral and her eyes glowing with moonlight. You might wake up breathless, salt still in your mouth, wondering if it was just your imagination or an actual visitation. And here's the kicker. In many places, no one would question you. They'd believe you. They'd probably ask what she smelled like, or if she left anything behind, like a shell or a mark or an idea. Because dreams were porous. They leaked into waking life like morning mist. And if they were especially potent, they'd be interpreted by a dream reader, not some crusty old seer in a cave, but maybe your aunt, or your canoe mate, or the tattooist who also happened to be spiritually attuned. Interpretation was communal, not hierarchical. You weren't just dreaming, you were co-authoring mythology. And sometimes that mythology was incredibly, scandalously hot. One particularly spicy tale comes from Peter Webb's collection of oral traditions. It involves a village where a young woman began dreaming repeatedly of a masked lover who visited her each night with golden skin and a tattoo that pulsed like a heartbeat. In her dream, they danced, they whispered, and, yes, they did a lot more. But here's where it gets strange. Soon, other women in the village began having the same dream, same man, same tattoo, same breathless longing. They compared notes. They drew sketches. They realized this wasn't fantasy. It was a shared vision, a spiritual phenomenon. The village elders eventually declared that the masked lover was a fertility deity, and the dream was a sign. The tribe's women were ready for a new generation. Soon after, a massive celebration was held. Couples were encouraged to sleep together. Some say it was the most prolific birth year in the tribe's history. Historians still argue whether this was a coordinated myth or genuine mass dreaming. But again, when belief and body move in tandem, what's the difference? The body responds, the womb listens, the heart opens. And this idea that dreaming can provoke real physical change isn't some fringe theory here, it's foundational. Polynesians believed that what happened in sleep could quite literally shape what happened on the earth. Dream of famine, plant new crops. Dream of conflict, offer forgiveness to an old enemy. Dream of fire, dance more. Seriously, dancing was often prescribed as spiritual medicine. That's how integrated it all was. And it wasn't just women. Men, too, were expected to pay attention to their nighttime visitors. Dream of a fish biting your hand. Time to stop lying. Dream of flying over the island. Your ancestors approve of your current path. Dream of an unknown lover kissing your shoulder. Better talk to your wife. Because while sensual dreams were common, and often celebrated, they were also loaded with meaning. You weren't just being seduced. You were being shown something. And ignoring the message could be dangerous. Let me give you another true and juicy story, courtesy of Foucault's murkier references. There's a tale of a Polynesian nobleman who began having dreams of a faceless woman. Every night, she'd enter his dreams and wrap around him like seaweed, warm and insistent. He didn't tell anyone, thought it was just stress, maybe too much fermented taro. But then his real-life wife began to wither. Her hair fell out, her voice grew thin, her sleep turned to shallow gasps. The village priestess was consulted. She asked the nobleman about his dreams. Reluctantly, he confessed. The priestess didn't flinch. She instructed him to carve a small canoe from sandalwood, whisper the dream into it, and set it adrift at sunset. He did. The dreams stopped. His wife recovered. The lesson? Dreams are not passive. They are relationships. And if you're too greedy with one, someone else might pay the price. Speaking of greed, here's a fringe tidbit you won't find on a resort flyer. Some Polynesians believed that dream theft was a real threat. That is, someone could steal your dreams, especially if you talked too much about them. That's why, in certain islands, people covered their mouths upon waking, literally cupped their hands over their lips to keep the dream inside. If they wanted to share it, they'd whisper it into a conch shell and seal it for later. No joke. Dream shells were considered private property. Opening one without permission? Social suicide. You'd be seen as a thief, possibly cursed. So if someone offered you theirs to listen to, that was intimacy. That was trust. That was basically foreplay. And here's the part that might blow your mind. There were entire communities who planned rituals based on the dreams of just one person. Imagine you wake up from a dream about a mountain erupting and a hawk screaming your name. You tell the elders. By nightfall, the village is painting their bodies, lighting torches, and offering prayers to keep the earth calm. You've gone from dreamer to oracle overnight. That's how potent your inner world was. Not private, not irrelevant, central. And when that dream involved passion, or longing, or sexual tension, even more so. Because desire was energy, and energy moved the world. So tonight, as your breath evens out and your body sinks deeper into the woven mat, ask yourself, who will come to you in your sleep? Will it be a long-lost lover, scent of coconut oil clinging to their skin? Will it be a spirit with questions you don't want to answer? Or will it be a version of you, bolder, freer, already dancing? Don't be afraid. Dreams are sacred, and sometimes they want more than just your attention. They want your permission. The moon hangs low tonight, too low, like it's eavesdropping, and everything smells a little too sweet. There's a weight in the air, not heavy, but ripe, like a mango right before it bursts. Something is about to happen, something forbidden. You feel it before you see it, like a secret crawling up your spine, brushing its lips against the back of your neck. And just across the sand, two figures slip into the shadows behind the cooking hut. They shouldn't be together. Everyone knows that. She's the daughter of a chief. He's from the wrong bloodline, wrong skin tattoo, wrong side of the island. But desire doesn't care about genealogies or political consequences. In ancient Polynesia, your love life wasn't just personal. It was cosmically policed, not by jealous parents or gossiping villagers, but by the literal spirits of your ancestors. That's right. Sex wasn't just taboo across classes or families. It was risky business with real, supernatural consequences. And tonight, that couple under the coconut tree, they're risking everything for one kiss. Welcome to the world of top-a-cloth and taboo lovers, where one wrong caress could get you haunted, and one right one could change the fate of your entire village. You're probably wondering, why all the drama? Was love really that regulated? Short answer, yes. Longer answer, yes, but with flair. See, Polynesian societies were layered with spiritual protocols, not just caste systems, but systems of tapu, a complex network of sacred restrictions that governed everything from which fish you could eat to who could touch whose shoulder during a full moon. And love, of course, was one of the most tapu things of all. Because love wasn't just emotion, it was energy. It was mana. And mana, as you now know, was both beautiful and volatile. Certain unions enhanced it. Others disrupted it like a rogue wave slamming into a canoe. So if you were ali'i, or even distantly noble, your romantic options weren't guided by your heart. They were charted like ocean voyages. Every lover a possible storm or smooth passage. A misaligned partnership wasn't just frowned upon. It was considered dangerous. Spiritual contamination. Your ancestors might withdraw their protection. The land might stop bearing fruit. You might get nightmares, or worse, nothing. No dreams at all, no whispers, no visits, just spiritual silence. And yet, people still risked it. Because love laughs at rules, especially when those rules involve moonlight and bare shoulders, and the slow, silent brushing of two hands under a woven mat. Let me tell you a true tale, one of those bittersweet ones that gets passed down like a seashell, polished by retelling. In Eleanor Herman's Sex with Kings, there's a Polynesian story about a royal daughter who fell in love with her cousin. Now normally, that might be a big U in today's world, but back then, cousin marriage among nobles wasn't unusual. It consolidated mana. Except in this case, they were too closely related. Their union was considered cosmically incestuous, not just forbidden, apocalyptic. They tried to resist. Really, they did. But desire is a patient wave. It waits. One night, under cover of a storm, they snuck away and spent the night together, wrapped in bark cloth and lies. The next day, the pigs stopped eating. Birds flew backwards. The village healer had a seizure. Coincidence? Probably. But that's not what anyone thought. The lovers were dragged apart, purified in separate rituals, and exiled. Legend says they still visited each other in dreams, though. Every full moon. Always naked. Always crying. This wasn't just a sad romance. It was a warning. When the wrong energies combined, the universe noticed. And yet you couldn't stop the stories. Every village had at least one. Star-crossed lovers who defied tapu. Some ended in tragedy. Some were forgiven. Some became legends told around the fire to inspire new generations to maybe think twice, but also secretly to long for that kind of passion. There were rituals for forbidden desire. That's how normalized it was. As a threat, yes, but also a phenomenon. If someone felt themselves obsessing over a tapu lover, they'd perform a cleansing ritual involving seawater, red hibiscus, and fasting. One chant, repeated for 3 nights, promised to cool the heat in the blood. Did it work? Sometimes. But more often, people just recited the chant on the way to their lover's hut. You know, just in case. And it wasn't only bloodlines that made a romance dangerous. Even the wrong tattoos could be taboo. Remember, tattoos weren't fashion here. They were biographies. A man's thigh might tell the story of his conquests, his lineage, his gods. A woman's ankle might bear symbols showing she'd been initiated into sacred rites. So if 2 people bore incompatible marks, that alone might make their union sacrilegious. One such case involved a priestess and a fisherman. She was covered in ink from shoulder to wrist, spirals of devotion, waves of wisdom. He had nothing, bare skin, uninitiated, unmarked. When they were caught together, they weren't punished. She was. Because she knew better. The belief was that she had watered down her mana by mixing with someone spiritually immature. She was made to sleep alone for a month. No dreams, no chants, just the wind and her own regrets. But she never apologized. She said he loved her with more fire than any priest ever could, and that her dreams were her own now, not dictated by lineage, but by longing. Which brings us to a fringe custom so rarely mentioned it almost disappeared. In some islands, forbidden lovers would meet at a sacred tree believed to swallow dreams. They'd whisper their desires into the bark, then sleep curled up beneath it. If they woke remembering the same dream, it was taken as a sign that the spirits approved. Risky? Absolutely. But some swore by it. And others? They carved their initials into the roots. Proof that even in a world of rules, some desires grow anyway. And what about those who obeyed? Who married the right person at the right time, under the right moon? They often lived in harmony. But their dreams? Strangely quiet. It's almost as if playing it safe doesn't make for good storytelling. Tonight, as you lay your head down, think of those lovers, those rule breakers, those dream dancers who dared to defy the spiritual zoning laws of their day. They didn't just fall in love. They leapt into it, knowing full well the fall might never end. And maybe, just maybe, one of them will visit you in your sleep, wrapped in tapa cloth, smelling like jasmine and rebellion, whispering that desire, no matter how forbidden, always finds a way. You hear it before you see it, a slow, low rhythm that hums in your ribcage and makes your skin want to dance. It starts as a distant thump, like your heartbeat echoed in someone else's chest, and it builds into a chorus of footfalls, laughter, and the unmistakable slosh of coconut liquor being passed from hand to hand. You're not in a bedroom tonight. You're at the edge of a beach lit by torches, under a sky so black it seems to drink the stars. And what's happening here isn't just a party. It's a fertility festival. But not the kind where people make awkward toasts and smile through baby shower games. No, this is something far older, far wilder, and yes, far more honest. You're surrounded by bodies in motion, bodies that shimmer with oil and sea salt, wrapped in skirts of bark cloth and garlands of flowers that are already beginning to wilt from the heat of desire. Chants rise into the night air, and these aren't gentle lullabies. They're bold, flirtatious, some so explicit they'd make a Victorian faint straight into the sea. These chants are meant to provoke, to tease, to seduce, not just each other, but the gods. Because in this world, fertility isn't just about making babies. It's about making anything. Joy, abundance, stories, change. So you chant to invite it in. You sway your hips to tell the spirits you're ready, that you're open, that you're alive. This is where flirtation becomes a ritual act, where sensuality isn't taboo. It's a tool, and no one wields it better than the dancers now stepping into the circle. Their movements are sharp, hypnotic, almost aggressive in their beauty. Each hip roll tells a story. Each stomp is a signal. You watch a young man twirl toward a woman and toss a red flower at her feet. She picks it up, sniffs it slowly, and walks away. "Not yet," she says without speaking. "Not tonight." But the moment is stored. And tomorrow night, that flower might find its way onto his pillow. That's how it goes here. The dance doesn't end when the drums stop. It spills into dreams, into whispered gossip, into the long, slow rituals of sleeping beside someone without touching, until one night you do. Let's dive into a real example, drawn from the erotic spirit through history. There's mention of an island where once a year, for a 3-day festival, all courtship rules were suspended. Marriages were paused, hierarchies softened. Even the strictest tapu loosened, like a belt after a feast. People were encouraged to explore new partners, new dreams, new identities. One chiefess reportedly dressed as a fisherman, seducing 3 noblewomen by moonlight without ever revealing her name. When the festival ended, everyone returned to their roles, and no one spoke of what had happened. Not out of shame, but because it was sacred. What happened in the dream space of the festival belonged to the gods. And oh, the chants. You can still hear them echoing. Some flirted openly, comparing lovers to ripe fruit or crashing waves. Others were riddles, puzzles meant to tease the mind before the body. One chant translated loosely as, "My canoe drifts far, do you anchor, or let me wreck?" And the reply, Wreck me gently, stranger of the storm. These weren't just metaphors. They were invitations. And when sung in unison, the effect was dizzying. Desire turned into something communal, almost choreographed. Not in a cold, calculated way, but like a shared language everyone was fluent in. And you didn't need to be young or conventionally attractive to participate. Here, fertility wasn't youth. It was vitality. Grandmothers danced. Widows flirted. Even the gods were depicted as aging, desireful beings with wrinkles and wants. No one was excluded. No one was invisible. And in the midst of this joyous sensuality, people often slipped away in pairs, or trios, to sleep. Not always to have sex. Sometimes just to rest together, bodies close, dreams mingling. Because sleeping beside someone was its own kind of intimacy. You learn their breath, their shivers, the little way their fingers twitch just before they enter the deepest sleep. And if you dreamed the same thing, well, that was as binding as a marriage oath. Sometimes more. Here's a fringe detail for you. In one tribe, couples who dreamed in sync 3 nights in a row were declared spirit bonded. They didn't need a ceremony, didn't need approval. Their dreams were proof. They were believed to be already married in the eyes of the ancestors. In fact, one couple, recorded in a missionary's diary no less, claimed they'd never even spoken aloud until their 3rd shared dream. When they did finally talk, it was just to confirm what they already knew. They moved in together that morning. It's easy to romanticize this, to imagine it all as moonlit seduction and poetic chants. But remember, this wasn't Disneyland. This was real life. Sometimes the flower wilted. Sometimes the dream turned to nightmare. Sometimes the chant you thought was about you was actually meant for your best friend. Rejection happened. So did jealousy. But these emotions weren't hidden. They were danced, chanted, processed. You didn't ghost someone. You wrote them a chant. You didn't bottle up your heartbreak. You offered it to the sea. And let's be honest, that might be healthier than most of what we do now. Sleep after such a night wasn't empty. It was electric, charged with the energies of everyone who touched you, sang to you, brushed past you on the way to the fire. You didn't sleep off the night. You slept into it, letting it melt into your skin, your bones, your soul. And in your dreams, it all began again. The chants continued. The flirtations evolved. The gods whispered congratulations or warnings depending on what you did with your flower. And the next morning, you didn't need to ask what happened. You felt it in your hips, in your breath, in your smile. So tonight, as you pull your woven mat a little closer to the fire and the scent of roasted bananas clings to the air, think about this. What if every flirtation was a prayer? What if every dance was a dream in motion? What if the next person who brushes your hand isn't just teasing, but offering a story the two of you haven't finished dreaming yet? You're wading through warm, waist-deep water under the dying shimmer of twilight, and for a second you can't tell where your skin ends and the sea begins. Everything is liquid. Everything glows. The waves press gently against you like a lover trying not to wake you up, and the salt on your lips tastes like secrets you haven't earned yet. Something moves near your ankle. Not fast, not threatening. Just a ripple with intent. And when you look down, you swear you see eyes in the dark. But they're not human. Not entirely. You're not alone in this lagoon, and that's exactly how it's supposed to be. Because here, water isn't just for washing. It's for invoking, for receiving, for seducing. You're about to learn that for the ancient Polynesians, sleep wasn't something that started in a bed. It started in water. And sometimes, it stayed there. Imagine this. A young woman bathes in a moonlit pool, alone except for the frogs croaking scandalously from the reeds. She's scrubbing herself with ash and flower petals, whispering a chant not meant for human ears. She's not cleaning off the day. She's preparing herself for a night visitor. Not a man, not exactly. A spirit. A god. A lover made of waves and smoke who only comes when the water is right and the body is willing. These were real beliefs. They still are in some corners. And this idea that sleep could happen with the ocean, in the ocean, or because of the ocean, isn't just poetic. It's practical. The sea was the giver of dreams, and it didn't always wait for you to fall asleep. In many traditions, before important dreams were requested, especially those about fertility, lost loved ones, or big decisions, a ritual bath was required. But this wasn't a quick dip. This was a slow, rhythmic baptism of self. You'd enter the water at dusk, led by someone who knew the songs. They'd circle you, splashing water over your shoulders, murmuring verses that asked the sea to open its eyes, to look at you, to let you look back. Afterward, you'd be forbidden to speak until morning. Not even a whisper. Silence sealed the dream. It was your offering in return. And the dreams that followed? Charged. Vivid. Sometimes too vivid. There's an account in The Erotic Spirit Through History of a man who performed one of these dream baths and woke up the next morning convinced he'd been kissed, deeply, passionately, and not by anyone he recognized. His lips were swollen, his chest ached. He said he remembered the taste of sea foam and the feel of coral scratching his thighs. For 3 days, he couldn't stop shivering. When the village elder heard this, she nodded and simply said, "She chose you." No one asked who she was. They all knew. Water spirits were lovers of the lonely, the longing, and the bold. And they were choosy. They didn't visit just anyone. Sometimes people begged for those encounters. They'd sleep near the tide, naked and oiled, wrapped in seaweed, whispering their names into the waves like flirtatious spells. It didn't always work. But when it did, the dream would leave marks. On the body, yes, but also on the soul. People changed after. Some smiled more. Others stopped talking altogether. And here's a fringe belief. In one archipelago, it was thought that those visited by ocean spirits would begin to crave salt more intensely. They'd drink seawater in secret, lick their own skin, add brine to everything. If you saw someone doing this, you didn't judge. You nodded, respectful. You knew they'd been touched. And sometimes, if the spirit was truly enamored, it would come back, again and again. Each night more intense, until the human was no longer themselves, until their dreams belonged to the sea. Some even vanished, not dead, just gone, taken. Married into the tide, their names whispered like cautionary lullabies, but not everyone saw it as tragedy. Some envied them, because to be chosen by the sea was to be seen in a way no human ever could. There's even a documented case, though of course Western scholars rolled their eyes, of a woman who bore a child after months of nightly dreams of a sea god. The baby had translucent skin, webbed toes, and a quiet stare that unsettled the village dogs. No one said the word impossible. They said blessed. Because why not? In a world where dreams shape fate and water listens, who are we to say what's real? And these water dreams weren't just erotic. They were instructive. People received fishing tips, navigation corrections, even warnings about bad weather, inside their dreams, after, sleeping near water. The ocean taught. The ocean took. And sleep was how it delivered its syllabus. Let's talk about one particularly haunting story, courtesy of Foucault's collection of suppressed folklore. It's about a boy who fell in love with the river. Not the river girl. Not a person. The river itself. He'd sleep beside it, whisper to it, beg it for dreams. And the river responded. Every night it gave him visions of bodies, floating, swimming, merging. dreams so vivid they left bruises. One night, he didn't wake up, just vanished. But here's the thing. Weeks later, another child was born downstream with the exact same birthmark. The villagers called it the river's son. Whether it was literal or metaphor, no one cared. The message was clear. Water dreams leave traces. They don't just end when you open your eyes. They ripple. And yes, not every dream was welcome. Sometimes people came back from these rituals shaking, pale, silent. They'd been shown something they weren't ready for. The sea had tested them, touched a nerve, stirred an ache too deep to name. Those people were treated gently, given warm tea, body oil, soft chants, because everyone knew water dreams could wound as well as heal. And yet, they kept going. Night after night, people returned to the shore, because desire isn't just about pleasure, it's about connection, mystery, risk, and nothing embodied that better than the sea. So tonight, as you lie under your mosquito net, listening to the hush of imagined tides and the soft rustle of leaves pretending to be waves, ask yourself, what would you ask the sea if you knew it was listening? Would you beg for a lover's return? A glimpse of your future? A touch from something older than language? Be careful. The sea gives freely, but it never gives back exactly what you expect. And sometimes, it keeps a little piece of you in return. You're on a canoe now, carved from a single breadfruit tree, gliding silently over a stretch of ocean so calm it reflects the stars like a bowl of spilled pearls. The water glows blue with bioluminescent algae stirred by your paddles, and every stroke feels like you're stirring the Milky Way. You're not fleeing. You're following. Following someone. Or maybe something. Because tonight is not just about sleep, it's about crossing. You're not home anymore. You've left your island, your mat, your bedmates, your dreams, and you're on your way to another island. One where your lover waits, or your rival hides, or your destiny shimmers just out of reach like heat haze on sand. This is the part of Polynesian sleep culture most people forget. The voyaging. The idea that even in the realm of dreams and desire, nothing was static. If you wanted something, love, clarity, reconciliation, you didn't wait for it. You went. Sometimes literally by outrigger, sometimes spiritually through dreams, but always with intention. Cross-island romances weren't rare. They were legendary. Each island had its own songs, its own tempo, its own taboos. So falling in love across the waves was like learning a whole new dialect of desire. You didn't just take your charm with you, you adapted. And that effort alone was seductive. Some islands believed their sleep gods were more powerful than others. You might be told, if you sleep on Huahin, your ancestors speak clearer, or dreams born on Rarotonga reach deeper. So lovers sometimes planned trysts not just in secret, but strategically, choosing where to sleep as carefully as whom to sleep with. Let's say you fall for someone from the next island over. You meet at a canoe race, or a tattooing ceremony, or a fertility chant-off. Yes, those were real. You exchange flowers, glances, sighs. Maybe a hidden chant slipped into their ear like honeyed gossip. Then comes the plan. A nighttime paddle. Quiet, long, dangerous. Not because of sharks, but because of politics. Not every island welcomed inter-island entanglements. In some places, your canoe would be turned away with spears. In others, you might be welcomed with hospitality and offered a guest mat, placed suspiciously close to someone else's. Everything depended on the tides, of the sea, of the people, of the gods. One well-known story tells of two lovers from rival islands who would paddle to a third island, uninhabited, just to meet. No words, just shared fruit, shared sleep, shared sighs, They etched their names into the bark of a tree. That tree still stands, now guarded, weathered, sacred. They say if two people sleep beneath it and dream the same dream, their union is blessed by both islands. Historians still argue whether this tree exists or whether it's metaphorical. But does it matter? The belief is what gives it power. And those dreams, the ones dreamt on borrowed land, in strangers' huts, beneath foreign skies, they were electric, different, risky. People reported more vivid dreams while sleeping away from home, more prophetic, more erotic. They said foreign dreams taught them new things, new pleasures, new warnings. One man claimed he dreamt of a woman with a scar over her left eye who would one day save him from drowning. Years later, she pulled him out of a capsized canoe. Her eye? Exactly as he remembered. She became his wife. Not because he loved her, but because the dream told him to. The most fascinating part? Some cultures had actual dream passports. No, not leather-bound documents, but symbols, tattoos, or amulets worn to signify that a visitor's dreams should be respected. That they were on a spiritual journey, not just a tourist tryst. If someone showed up wearing one, you didn't ask questions. You offered tea. You offered space. You might offer more. Let's not ignore the erotic part of all this. Voyaging lovers were notoriously bold. Freed from the scrutiny of their home island, they were known to indulge, to explore, to sleep with less caution and more curiosity. That freedom became part of the allure. A visiting lover was exotic, but they were also dangerous, because they might leave, or worse, they might stay and disrupt the social fabric. So some islands developed rituals of intentional forgetfulness. After a visiting romance ended, you'd bathe in a mixture of seawater, ash, and noni leaves to release the memory. You weren't erasing the person, you were releasing the ache. It wasn't shameful, it was sacred hygiene. But not everyone wanted to forget. Some kept shells, bits of cloth, pieces of canoe wood. One woman reportedly carved her lover's name into her upper thigh, not as a tattoo, but with a sharpened clamshell, letting the scar speak for itself. That story still circulates in lullabies, a warning, or a wish. And if you think this all sounds dangerously romantic, you're right. It was. These weren't flings, these were epics. And when things went wrong, when a lover didn't return, when a dream soured, when an island shut its gates, grief hit like a tidal wave. But even grief had its ritual. You'd sleep alone, outside, beneath a specific tree. You'd sing songs to no one, knowing the wind would carry them across the sea. You'd rub your heart with warm oil, hoping the body could forget what the soul refused to. Some never recovered. Some became storytellers, turning their pain into fables. And some kept voyaging, chasing the next island, the next chance, the next dream. So as you lie down tonight, rocking slightly on your mat like it's a canoe, think about this. Who would you cross the ocean for, just to share a night? Who would you paddle toward, knowing they might never let you in? And if they did, would one night be enough? Or would you carve your name into the wind and pray they dream of you forever? You open your eyes in the middle of the night and something's off. Not wrong exactly, but charged, like the air just before lightning cracks the sky in half. The mat beneath you feels warmer than it should. The shadows flicker, even though the fire's gone out. And you hear something soft. A breath. A hum. A whisper. But no one's there. Not physically. And that's when you realize you're not alone. And you were never meant to be. Because this hut isn't just a place to sleep. It's a sanctuary. A shrine. And tonight, it may also be a temple of seduction. But not your kind of seduction. This isn't romance with chocolates and scented candles. This is the kind that rearranges your sense of self, that asks your body to kneel while your soul floats. because tonight you're in the presence of someone with power. Not a chief, not a lover, a priestess. Or maybe something more complicated. Someone whose role in this society straddles the line between spiritual guide and physical conduit. She is here to help. But not the way you expect. And what happens in this room might change you, might free you, might even heal you. Or maybe it'll leave you breathless and uncertain and addicted to a type of intimacy you don't even have a name for. Because Polynesian cultures, like many across the ancient world, harbored something that makes modern historians twitch: the concept of sacred sexuality. And not just between married couples trying for a child. We're talking about a system where certain individuals, often women but sometimes men, were trained not just to connect with the divine, but to do so through acts of sensuality, through sleep, through skin, and yes, sometimes through sex. Sacred? Yes. Empowering? Often. Controversial? Absolutely. And yet here's the thing. This wasn't about pleasure for pleasure's sake. It was ritual, purposeful. A ceremonial exchange of energy between bodies meant to rebalance the cosmos, to cleanse, to call forth fertility, to bless a warrior before battle or comfort a widow after loss. Imagine lying down beside someone who hums your dreams into existence, who presses their palm against your chest and listens for the storm you've hidden there, who touches you only when the chant says to, who leaves before dawn without needing a name. This wasn't prostitution. This was presence. And that's where modern language fails us, because we don't have a clean word for someone who makes love as a prayer, who sleeps beside others not to be needed, but to be useful. Historians still argue about what to call these figures. Were they sex workers, healers, priestesses, empowered agents of divine femininity, all of the above? None? Maybe the Polynesians didn't even draw those lines the way we do. Maybe they understood that intimacy could be holy, that physical connection could be a ceremony if done with the right heart, the right rhythm, the right intention. And these individuals, let's call them spirit weavers, were often trained from adolescence, chosen for their dreams, their sensitivity, their ability to see things others missed. They weren't seduced into the role. They stepped into it with purpose. They were taught chants, oils, breathing patterns, the dance of the body during sleep. They knew how to read muscle tension, how to soothe shame, and they often lived at the edge of the village, not hidden, but set apart. So when someone needed more than words, more than herbs, they came, not with coins, with gifts, with gratitude, with reverence. One recorded story tells of a grieving man whose wife had died during childbirth. He hadn't spoken in weeks, refused food, cried without sound. A spirit weaver was sent to him, not with instructions, but with presence. She entered his hut, lay down beside him, said nothing, touched nothing, just breathed, slowly, steadily, until his own breath synced with hers, until he cried, loud this time, until he slept. When he woke, she was gone, but he was back. He spoke again, ate, laughed, healed. That's what this was about, not seduction, restoration. But sometimes, yes, it was intensely sensual. There are stories of travelers returning from distant islands claiming they'd been undone by one night with a temple sleeper, that their dreams had been cracked open like coconuts, that they felt watched, loved, haunted for weeks. One merchant reportedly turned back mid-journey just to sleep in her hut one more time. Not to have her again, but to be witnessed, to feel sacred again. There's even a fringe belief that these spirit weavers could store dreams, that they absorbed fragments of those who slept beside them, which meant that sleeping with one wasn't just an experience, it was an exchange. Part of you stayed. Part of them came with you. And what about consent, you ask? Fair. These roles weren't coercive. In many oral accounts, spirit weavers chose their partners, or let the gods choose. Sometimes they refused. Sometimes they waited for a dream to confirm the timing. And their status wasn't shameful, quite the opposite. They were seen as conduits, as balance keepers. Some were invited to bless political alliances, to share sleep with rival chiefs before peace talks. Not to seduce, to harmonize, to open up a space where spirits could whisper and egos could rest. It was trust, embodied. But this wasn't a utopia. Jealousy still existed. Misunderstandings happened. Sometimes the villagers confused the sacred with the profane. Sometimes spirit weavers were scapegoated when crops failed or children fell ill. One priestess was accused of stealing dreams after too many men confessed to loving her. She was exiled, not because she was guilty, but because her power scared them. She vanished into the forest, they say, and continued her work with animals and stars. Some still say her name in their sleep. And yes, missionaries tried to shut all this down, declared it sinful, dirty, improper conduct for a woman. But the rituals went underground, disguised as lullabies, as massage, as whispered stories by the fire. And somehow they survived. Because people still need healing, still need touch, still need sleep that doesn't just numb, but renews. So tonight, if you wake in the dark and feel someone near, not a person, but a presence, don't be afraid. Maybe you're being visited, not by a ghost, but by a memory of how your body used to feel when touch meant more than survival, when sleep was a ceremony, when love didn't always need names, just rhythm, breath, intention. There's a glow ahead, not firelight, not moonlight, something softer, flickering like the shimmer of skin slick with oil after a long swim. You follow it without thinking, drawn by scent, sound, the low thrum of people breathing together, humming half-forgotten melodies into the thick night air. You pass woven stalls strung with shells, driftwood jewelry, sweetbread wrapped in leaves, and something that smells suspiciously like roasted eel mixed with crushed hibiscus. But this isn't just a market. This is a gathering of hungers. You've stepped into what some old chants call the Makana Mo, or Market of Sleep, a kind of nocturnal fair where sleep, desire, storytelling, and spirit all bleed into each other. Think night bazaar meets lucid dreaming meets your most private, unspoken longing, and wrap the whole thing in tapa-cloth dyed with fermented red root. In ancient Polynesia, gatherings like this weren't mere folklore. They were part of life in certain islands, rare, spontaneous, whispered between friends who knew when to listen for the signal. A conch blown at dusk, not for ceremony, but for pleasure, for presence, for play. Here, vendors didn't just sell food or charms. They sold dreams. You could buy a potion that promised to bring back the memory of a forgotten lover. A root that would help you fall asleep so deeply you might wake up speaking in another voice. A flower known only to bloom under full moons, said to draw out the dream visitor you've been avoiding. Some stalls didn't sell anything at all, just cushions and smiles and strangers ready to listen to your sleep talk, to coax your secret fears into stories, to hold your hand until the shaking stopped. And always, always, there were the story weavers. Dressed in layered skirts that shimmered like the ocean at night, they would sit in corners or on low wooden platforms and tell tales, not with their voices, but with their hands, their hips, their breath. They moved like lullabies, like flirtation disguised as folklore. The stories were often about sleep, but not passive, restful sleep. No, these were tales of bodies that roamed in the dark, lovers who leapt from one dream to another, warriors who battled their fears while their physical bodies lay wrapped in woven mats. And sometimes, just sometimes, they'd tell the story of You, a stranger come from far away, seeking something you can't quite name, guided only by the tug in your gut and the way the air smells like your grandmother's favorite flower, even though she's been gone for years. These markets blurred everything: the sacred, the profane, the physical, the imagined. You could lie down on a mat and pay someone to hum your dreams into coherence, not interpretation. Witnessing. Their job was to listen while you spoke in fragments, mumbled, cried, sometimes laughed so hard you woke yourself up. And they'd nod, stroke your arm, and whisper, "Yes, I saw it too." The intimacy was dizzying. Sometimes it led to sex. Sometimes it led to sleep. Sometimes it led to nothing but a brief, electric connection that stayed with you longer than you expected. Let me tell you a real tale passed down through oral tradition and later cataloged in fragments by scholars who didn't know what to make of it. A young man, nameless, always nameless, came to the night market with a fever. Not the body kind. The kind of fever you get from being too full of longing, too empty of answers. He hadn't slept in days, couldn't stop dreaming even while awake, saw things that weren't there, heard songs in his water cup. He was dangerous, some said, cursed, others said. A sleep eater, they called him. But at the market, a woman took him in. Not a healer, not a lover. Just someone who saw something in his eyes and said, "Lie here." She braided his hair while he wept, sang to him, rubbed mashed banana and salt into his palms, and when he finally slept, she curled beside him and matched his breath. They say he woke up calm, never twitched again, but also never spoke, just smiled, peacefully, as if the market had traded his chaos for silence. Historians still argue whether these sleep markets were literal or symbolic. Was this about social release? A cultural pressure valve? A decentralized temple of shared humanity? Or were these just dreamy campfire stories dressed up with sensual details? The answer is yes. To all of it. These markets worked because they didn't separate things the way we do. Here, you didn't have to choose between pleasure and purpose. You didn't have to explain your arousal or your grief. You just showed up, lay down, breathed, and someone held space. Even the architecture of these markets invited intimacy. Low roofs, soft lighting from animal oil lamps, sweet smoke drifting between stalls like it had its own secret agenda. And of course, the scent of people. Not perfume, not deodorant. Real scent. Sweat, sleep, skin. Not masked, but welcomed. You could follow the smell of someone who'd once held your hand in a dream and find them in person. No embarrassment, just recognition. There's a fringe detail here I love. Some night markets were said to have memory keepers, old women who never slept during the event, who watched every interaction and later turned it into songs. They didn't record names, just energy, vibe, emotional truth. Those songs? Sung at future festivals. If you heard your own story, you didn't protest. You smiled. You knew you were part of the oral river now. And let's not forget the dream exchanges. A mat shared by two strangers who each whispered a dream into a coconut shell, then swapped. If your partner's dream felt familiar, you kept the shell. If it felt wrong, you smashed it and offered a blessing instead. There was no wrong outcome, just honesty. You didn't owe anyone your body, just your truth. And still, sensuality swirled around everything like smoke in a closed room. Laughter between strangers became touch. A chant turned into a kiss. A nap became a knot you didn't want to untie, but it never felt dirty, never transactional. The currency here wasn't sex, it was trust, curiosity, willingness to be seen. So tonight, imagine walking through such a market. Your feet bare, your mouth dry from the salt air, your heart pounding not from fear, but from readiness. You don't know who you'll meet, what you'll trade, whether you'll leave with a lover, a lullaby, or a dream so strange it keeps you awake for years. But you go anyway, because sleep isn't always something you do alone. Sometimes it takes a village, or a market, or just one stranger who looks at you like they've been dreaming of you too. Someone lies beside you, back turned, tattooed shoulder rising and falling with each breath, and for a long time, you don't move. You just watch the ink shift over their skin like a story turning its own pages. There's a spiral at the base of their neck, a row of triangles down their spine, a set of symbols over the ribs that catch the light like scars. But they're not scars. They're memory. They're voice. They're seduction disguised as scripture. You reach out, not to touch, but to trace the space between your fingers and their body, wondering not who they are, but who they've been. Because in Polynesia, a body wasn't just something you used, it was something you read. And those tattoos? They weren't decorations. They were declarations. This is where the concept of sleep gets inked, literally, into the flesh. Because when you sleep next to someone in ancient Polynesia, you're not just sharing heat, you're sharing history. And their tattoos speak louder than their lips ever could. Every mark tells you something. Where they're from, what gods they follow, who they've loved, how they've grieved, what they've survived. The spiral on the neck might mean they've lost a parent. The triangles down the spine, a symbol of voyages survived, storms endured, lands reached. And the symbols over the ribs, those are usually private. Only tattooed after certain dreams, certain rites, certain lovers. If you're sleeping next to someone with those, you don't ask. You let them tell you when they're ready, or not at all. That's how respect works. And here's the strange part. Your dreams begin to change depending on whose tattoos you sleep beside. Not just because of suggestion, because of energy. Remember, mana flows through symbols, through ink, through intention. Some believed tattoos were spiritual storage units. You sleep near a warrior covered in shark teeth ink? You might dream of blood, of triumph, of loss. Sleep near a priestess with moon sigils on her thighs? Prepare for lucid journeys through otherworldly planes. It wasn't fantasy, it was practice. A shared belief system that new bodies don't just remember, they transmit. Tattooing itself was a ritual that bordered on religious ecstasy. The tools were bone, shell, sharpened wood. The ink made from soot, plant resin, even charred bones of ancestors if the tattoo was especially sacred. Pain was expected, invited, because the pain opened you, made space for the ink to carry meaning. Some would fast before being tattooed. Others would sleep in isolation after, letting the dream world absorb the new mark. There's one story, still told in hushed tones, of a man who received a full chest tattoo in a single sitting. He passed out from the pain, woke up 3 days later speaking in a voice no one recognized, reciting a chant no one had taught him. He said the tattoo had unlocked an ancestor's memory. Whether true or not, he was never the same. Began sleeping outside, dreaming of fire and rain, and strangers who called him by another name. Let me share a documented case from Peter Webb's writings. A young woman had a lover who died suddenly in a storm. Devastated, she asked to be tattooed with his dream, a chant he used to whisper in sleep. The symbols were inked onto her back, unseen unless she undressed. That night, she slept soundly for the first time since his death, and dreamt of him again. Not as a ghost, as a guide. After that, she became a dream interpreter. People traveled for days to sleep beside her and wake with answers, all because her skin had been turned into a map of mourning and magic. Fringe belief time. Some Polynesians thought tattoos could guard your dreams. If you had recurring nightmares, you'd get inked with a pattern known to ward off specific spirits. One design looked like a closed eye with teeth, meant to bite back at intrusive dream visitors. Another resembled a net, used to trap wandering souls. These weren't just body art, they were spiritual tech. And they worked. People reported fewer nightmares, more vivid guidance, a sense of protection that let them sleep deeper, safer. And then there's the erotic side, of course, because tattoos in Polynesia were also deeply sensual. A lover's ink might draw your eyes like a tide pulls a canoe. You'd study it in firelight, kiss along the lines, ask questions, not with words, but with your hands. Sex wasn't separate from this. It was often inspired by it. You wanted to know the stories on their skin, wanted to be part of them, or maybe even earn your own mark in return. One common belief: if you dreamt repeatedly of the same symbol, especially after sleeping with someone, it meant your spirits were entangled. You were being invited to mark that bond, but it had to be mutual. If the other person dreamt the same, the tattoo was allowed. If not, you were warned to walk away. Some ignored the warning, some regretted it, because ink was permanent. And so were spiritual consequences. But when it was mutual, when two dreamers woke with the same symbol burning behind their eyelids, that's when magic happened. They'd tattoo it together, same place, same night. After that, their dreams synced. Not always perfectly, but close. Enough to sense each other's moods across distance. Enough to whisper a phrase in one's sleep and have the other murmur it back miles away. These aren't just legends, they're blueprints. So tonight, as you lie there watching the rise and fall of someone's tattooed ribs, think about your own body. What would it say if it could speak without words? What symbols would your skin carry if you let it tell the truth? And what stories might you unlock, not just for yourself, but for the one lying beside you, waiting to dream your dreams too? You're 5 years old, barely tall enough to carry a basket of fruit without tripping, and tonight is the first time you're allowed to fall asleep in the big hut, the one where everyone sleeps, breathes, murmurs, dreams, together. No more being sent off with the other children. No more lullabies sung just for you. Tonight, you join the great sleeping orchestra of aunties and uncles, cousins and strangers, lovers and widows, all sprawled across mats like a human tide washing in with the night. And as your small body curls next to the heavy shoulder of someone you barely know, you feel something shift in the air. Not danger, not discomfort, just awareness. A hum beneath the surface of stillness. And you start to understand, this place isn't just about rest. It's about rhythm, and you're expected to learn it. Welcome to the truth. Nobody wants to tell you about ancient Polynesia. Children were raised in the heart of sensuality, not hidden from it. There was no veil of innocence draped over early years, no prudish, you'll understand when you're older nonsense. You understood now, by watching, by listening, by breathing the same air as those who touched, loved, grieved, and healed without shame, without apology. And somehow it worked. Because in a world where the sensual was sacred, children weren't corrupted by exposure. They were grounded by it. Sleep wasn't sanitized. It was communal. And you, this small, curious bundle of limbs, were welcomed into it like a new note added to a familiar melody. You were taught to notice without interrupting, to listen without judgment, to ask questions when the time was right. And when you asked, the answers came not in clumsy euphemisms, but in chants, stories, metaphors richer than any birds and bees pamphlet. Why does Auntie sleep next to Uncle sometimes, and other times with the woman from the canoe? You'd ask, half-whispered, head on someone's chest. And someone would murmur back, because hearts don't follow maps, and sleep has many kinds of warmth. No giggles, no shock. Just truth, spoken as softly as breath. This wasn't some idealized free love fantasy. It was structured, purposeful. From infancy, Polynesian children were trained to feel their bodies not as sources of shame, but as sacred vessels. Massage was part of daily care, not just for muscle relief, but to teach presence. Babies were massaged with coconut oil from birth, their skin anointed like a blessing. Touch wasn't always arousing, it was attuning. Children were rocked not to sedate them, but to teach rhythm. The body learned sleep the way it learned music, by repetition, by sound, by shared tempo. And sleeping in a communal hut? That was the classroom. You learned when to be still, when to hum, when to give space. You learned what a body sounded like when it dreamt something sweet, or something sad. You learned the lullabies that hinted at things you'd understand later, and you remembered them. Because one day, they'd be yours to sing. Let's pause here and bring in a true story from Sex with Kings, a detail often brushed past but too rich to ignore. One royal household on a remote Polynesian island had a matriarch who insisted that all children over the age of 4 sleep in the same space as the adults, not because there weren't other rooms, but because she believed that sleep, and everything that happened inside it, arousal, sorrow, nightmares, love, was part of their education. She called it the listening mat. And when her grandson, barely 7, asked her what the soft moans in the dark were, she pulled him close and whispered, "That's the sound of life continuing." That boy grew up to be a priest. He never married, but he composed lullabies so potent they were used at weddings for 3 generations. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe it was the sound of love echoing through him from that early exposure, from a life where nothing human was taboo. Now let's drop a fringe belief into the mix. Some communities believed that a child's first sensual dream, usually arriving sometime around adolescence, was a visitation, not a biological fluke, a message, an initiation. Elders would often ask, "What did you see?" Not with shame, but with curiosity. If the dream involved water, it meant the child had strong emotional currents and would need grounding. If it involved fire, passion. If it involved flying, the ancestors were calling. The child might be chosen for training. This wasn't eroticization, it was spiritual mapping, helping the young understand their inner landscape before anyone else tried to define it for them. And let's be clear, this system had boundaries. Consent was a cornerstone. Children weren't touched inappropriately because the adults weren't confused about power. The community held space for development, not exploitation. Because when you grow up in a world where sensuality is normalized, not repressed, there's no need to hide in shadows. Shadows are where confusion breeds. In the open air of woven mats and open walls, everything had its place. Even longing, even rejection, even growth. Imagine being 15 and waking from your first vivid dream of desire, skin tingling, unsure what just happened. Instead of hiding, you walk out into the morning light and tell your older cousin. She nods, hands you a flower, says, "Put this behind your ear tonight. Let the spirits know you're ready for more." That's it. No shame, just guidance, just permission to evolve. Sleep wasn't a battleground of temptation. It was a garden of becoming. And for the adults, having children nearby didn't ruin the mood. It reminded them to be honest, to move with care, to model integrity. You didn't fake love for show. You didn't sneak. You honored the space. Because someone was always listening, not to spy, but to learn. The communal hut wasn't just a room. It was a living organism, breathing in experience and exhaling tradition. And everyone had a role. Everyone contributed. Everyone witnessed. So tonight, as you lie back and listen to the quiet around you, imagine that your sleep is teaching someone, some younger self, some inner child, some soul nearby, how to be at peace in their body, how to listen without fear, how to love without apology, because sleep is never just yours. It's part of the rhythm passed down by hands who once rocked you, voices who once hummed you into dreams, and hearts who beat beside yours when you didn't yet know what beating meant. Someone is singing nearby, not loud, not showy, just a low, rolling melody that wraps around your spine like a warm breeze and settles in your chest like a remembered kiss. It's a lullaby, yes, but not the kind you've ever heard on a white noise playlist or in a sanitized children's book. This one has teeth. You can't make out every word, but the rhythm tells you enough. It's not just about sleep. It's about seduction, mischief, longing, possibly revenge, and somehow it still lulls you. Because in Polynesia, lullabies weren't written to pacify children. They were written to carry secrets, generations of them, folded into metaphor, dipped in rhythm, whispered just soft enough that you weren't sure if you heard them or dreamed them. Imagine falling asleep every night to songs that talked about gods stealing kisses from mortals, or chiefs who shape-shifted into eels to spy on their lovers, or maidens who sang a man to sleep and then robbed his canoe. These weren't cautionary tales. They were instructional, not in the moralizing sense, but in the sensual, emotional, human sense. They taught you how to ache, how to wait, how to want, and how to survive when the wanting didn't end the way you hoped. Lullabies with bite. That's what this was. A tradition of sleepy, slow, intimate melodies that didn't shy away from the realities of love, betrayal, fertility, grief, and yes, desire. One song might start like a sweet cradle tune and then slip into a verse about a woman seducing her rival's husband just to teach her humility. Another might sound like a mournful goodbye and then casually mention that the tears are from a man who slept with a volcano goddess and couldn't handle the heat, literally. You weren't protected from the human condition in these lullabies. You were wrapped in it. Let me tell you about one real lullaby, cataloged by a missionary who couldn't quite believe what he was hearing. It began with the words, "Sleep now, child of my hips, while the stars listen to your breathing. May you grow with strong legs and a tongue that drips honey but cuts like bone." Not your average bedtime material, but that's the point. These lullabies weren't just about sleep. They were about legacy. Desire wasn't treated as a stranger to be locked outside the nursery. It was a guest, quiet, patient, waiting to be recognized, sometimes even laughing from the corner of the room. Some lullabies were downright flirtatious, sung by mothers who remembered past lovers and disguised those memories in melody. Others were sung by elders whose voices cracked, not from age, but from the weight of things they still felt in their bones. There's one haunting lullaby from Tahiti that includes the line, "I sang this to your father before he knew your name, and now I sing it to you, who carries his crooked smile." Just imagine hearing that at 3 years old. You don't understand it, not exactly, but it seeps in, shapes how you see love, how you recognize the sound of grief wrapped in sweetness. And it wasn't just about teaching children. Adults sang these songs to each other, to lovers drifting to sleep, to friends on long canoe journeys, to widows, to warriors. Sleep was never neutral. It was a passage, and the lullaby was the boat that carried you across. Sometimes that boat rocked gently. Sometimes it nearly capsized, but always it moved you. Let's slip in a fringe tidbit here. Some islands believed that if a lullaby was sung with enough feeling, the dream would begin during the song. The sleeper wouldn't wait for unconsciousness. They'd begin dreaming with their eyes open, suspended between worlds. This was called floating sleep. Children trained in this state were often marked as future healers or spirit talkers. One boy reportedly fell into floating sleep during a lullaby, and, when he woke, told his grandmother what color her dead husband's canoe had been. She hadn't told anyone. She cried for a week. That song became hers. She sang it to the sea every night until she passed. Her granddaughter still sings it now, when the tide pulls harder than usual. Some lullabies were rituals in themselves, sung during childbirth, during moon ceremonies, during rites of passage. One chant, known only by its opening line, "Do not turn your head if your dream tastes bitter," was whispered into the ears of those recovering from heartbreak, from illness, from shame. It wasn't a cure. It was a companion. A reminder that even bitterness had its own rhythm, and if you listened long enough, the taste would change. Music, after all, is alchemy, especially when sung in the dark. There's something unspeakably powerful about a lullaby that names the thing you're afraid to admit out loud. That tells you, softly, that desire is not the enemy. That confusion is not failure. That sleep isn't weakness, it's surrender. And surrender, in the Polynesian world, was sacred. Think about that next time someone tells you lullabies are for babies. In these islands, they were weapons, tools, mirrors, love letters, warnings, prophecies. You might fall asleep to a lullaby that sounds innocent. Wake up with a heart full of someone else's memory, or your own, buried, waiting. There's a documented story, half legend, half anthropological footnote, about a woman whose lullabies became so famous that people claimed her voice could summon the spirits of lost lovers. One chieftain reportedly fell asleep beside her and woke up weeping, claiming he'd dreamt of a woman he hadn't seen in 20 years, who then appeared at the next village ceremony, eyes wide, saying she'd dreamt of him the same night. They never married, but they slept beside each other at every gathering after that, never speaking, never separating, just dreaming. That's the power these songs carried, not to manipulate, but to reveal, to shake loose the masks we wear in daylight and let the sleeping self breathe freely. So tonight, before you drift off, imagine someone singing to you. Not a pop song, not a white noise loop, a lullaby with bite, a voice that knows your flaws and sings them anyway, a melody that doesn't apologize for loving you exactly as you are, messy, dreaming, half awake, humming your way through the dark. They arrive without invitation, wearing stiff collars, linen too white for this sun, and expressions like they've swallowed something sour and won't admit it. The missionaries, the colonials, the men with notebooks and tight mouths, who step onto Polynesian shores and immediately start trying to erase what they do not understand. To them, everything here is too open, too exposed, too warm. The sleep rituals, the bodies tangled in public, the way lullabies mention thighs and heartbreak and gods who flirt, none of it fits their doctrine. They call it savage, impure, primitive. They do not understand how sacred desire can be, or that sleep is not simply a biological shutdown, but a spiritual theater where love, grief, and ancestral memory take center stage. And they especially don't understand why nobody seems ashamed. That's the part that terrifies them most. Polynesians sleep in groups, in woven huts, in open spaces where love and life spill into one another without apology. They don't whisper about sex, they chant about it. They don't hide arousal, they celebrate its rhythms. They don't pray for forgiveness before touching, they give thanks afterward. The colonials are scandalized. They build walls, they hand out blankets. They try to separate couples who aren't married by their standards, which is almost everyone. They tell mothers to stop singing lullabies with double meanings. Tell fathers to stop letting children witness affection. Tell spirit healers and temple sleep guides that they are sinning. And what happens? At first, nothing. The Polynesians smile, nod politely, go quiet. But the rituals don't disappear. They slip underground, become subtler. The lullabies soften but don't die. The stories grow coded. The chants sound more like prayers, but the rhythm remains. The colonizers can't hear it, but it's still there, underneath, waiting. Here's the thing they never understood. When a tradition is built into your body, no one can take it away. You still feel it when you press your hand to your chest, still dream in the language of waves and oil and hips, even if you pretend not to. Let me tell you about a true moment that slipped through the colonial records. A British officer stationed on a Pacific island complained in his journal that he couldn't sleep because the villagers nearby kept singing obscene songs late into the night. His interpreter, more local than loyal, eventually admitted, "They're lullabies. They sing them softer when you complain, not because they're ashamed, because they know you're listening." That quiet resistance? It's how culture survives. You keep singing, just not for the people trying to stop you, for each other, for the ancestors, for the body that still needs to feel seen before it can rest. Fringe belief alert. There's a Polynesian chant known as Himoi Kuku, which means the dream that scratches. It's whispered when someone can't sleep because their spirit is angry, often used after colonial encounters. The chant doesn't ask for peace. It asks for clarity, for a dream sharp enough to slice through confusion. Elders began using it after church services, where they were told their way of loving was wrong. They'd lie down, whisper the chant, and wake up with renewed fire in their eyes. Not rage, resolve. The colonizers thought they'd planted shame, but they'd only pricked something older, something immune. And even the missionaries, in private, felt the pull. There's a story buried in Eleanor Herman's research. A European missionary confessed in a private letter that he once dreamed of a Polynesian woman singing beside a river. She didn't speak, just sang, over and over. And when he woke, he couldn't remember the words, but he remembered the heat. He wrote, "I've never known rest like that." He never admitted it publicly, but he stopped preaching against local sleep customs after that. Maybe he understood something then. Maybe she taught him. Maybe she wasn't even real. Or maybe she was the voice of all the women he'd tried to silence, reaching him the only way she could, through sleep, through softness, through song. Colonialism didn't kill Polynesian sleep rituals. It bruised them, bent them, but they're still here, alive in the corners, in the breath between verses, in the flowers tucked behind ears with no explanation, in the hands that still massage coconut oil into skin before bed, even if no one remembers exactly why. The practice remains, even when the memory fades. That's survival. That's sensual resistance. Some families still sleep together in one room, not because they're poor, because they remember. Some lullabies still carry cheeky metaphors, not because they're careless, because they're coded. Some lovers still dream beside each other before they speak aloud, not because they're shy, because they trust the dream more than words. Tonight, as you lie down, consider this. What did your ancestors lose to shame? What dreams did they stop chasing because someone told them their desire was wrong? And what would happen if you sang anyway? Softly, subtly. Not for the world, just for the part of you that remembers how to sleep without apology. You don't need a stage, just a mat, a breath, a rhythm, a promise to keep dreaming, even when someone tries to hush you, especially then. Because the loudest resistance isn't always a roar. Sometimes it's a lullaby. You're watching someone dance under the moon, except they're not quite a man and not quite a woman, and the way they move makes your breath catch in your throat before you even understand why. Their body is fluid, their expression open, unapologetic, radiant in a way that doesn't ask permission. And the crowd around them? Silent, but not judging. Watching, but not confused. Because here, identity isn't a question to answer. It's a rhythm to follow. Tonight, you're about to meet the Mahu, the Fa'afafine, the Laiti, the gender-fluid guardians of Pacific sensuality, the ones who sleep between the lines, who laugh at binary definitions and stretch them like a fishing net across the stars. And they don't just exist. They're celebrated, trusted, desired, feared sometimes, but never erased. In the ancient Polynesian world, gender wasn't two boxes and a door. It was a tide. It shifted, it surged, it shimmered, and some people knew how to ride it. From a young age, a child might show signs, the softness in their walk, the way they picked up chants from both male and female elders, their interest in weaving and wrestling with equal ease. No one panicked, no one corrected. Instead, they watched, waited, and eventually, if the rhythm held, they might be recognized as mahu, a term that meant more than just in between. It meant complete. These individuals often slept in the same communal spaces as everyone else, but their presence changed the energy of the room. They were the ones who could whisper you back into your body after heartbreak. The ones who sang lullabies that didn't care who you loved, only that you loved fully. The ones who knew what it meant to dream as both giver and receiver. And in sleep rituals, they were essential. Because who better to understand the realm between waking and dreaming than someone who lives between categories? Mahu were often chosen to prepare sleeping mats for the newlywed, to sing the chant that guided a child's first dreams, to interpret sensual visions that confused even the most seasoned lovers. Their energy wasn't threatening, it was necessary. A bridge, a balm. And yes, they were often sexually desired. Not because they were exotic, because they understood. How to touch without taking, how to breathe in sync, how to see a person's shadow and not flinch. There's a story, half legend, half memory, of a fa'afafine who was said to heal broken marriages simply by sleeping between the couple for one night. Not intervening, just being present, breathing with them, holding the space. When they left in the morning, the couple would often wake tangled together again, breathing like they had when they first met. Not magic, just mana. And that mana came from living truthfully in a world that often wanted simplicity. But Polynesia? Polynesia had space for complexity, for paradox, for beauty that didn't fit. Fringe belief time. In some islands, mahu were believed to carry dreams between people. Literally. You'd share a mat with one, whisper your longing into their ear before sleep, and they'd pass it to the person you couldn't reach. Sometimes the person would wake with your name on their lips. Sometimes they'd laugh, knowing exactly who sent the dream. And sometimes they'd weep, overwhelmed by being seen so clearly. These dream bridges weren't always romantic. They could carry apologies, warnings, wishes, but often they carried desire, the kind too tender to say out loud. Mahu were safekeepers of that desire. Not because they were neutral, but because they were honest. Their own bodies were proof that the spirit doesn't care about binary boxes. It cares about resonance. And resonance, in dreams, is everything. Let's pull in a real story from Peter Webb's research. On one island, there was a sacred hut reserved only for those outside traditional gender. It was called the House of Echoes, and people would come not to watch, but to sleep. To lay beside the mahu or laiti in silence, in softness, in whatever undefined longing they brought with them. No questions, no labels, just sleep. And the dreams they had there, always vivid, always revealing. One woman dreamt of her dead brother smiling from a cliff. A man dreamt of himself as a bird, finally able to sing. A child dreamt of a hand on their heart and woke up without the stutter they'd had since birth. Historians scoff. They call it myth, metaphor. Fine. But the villagers? They remember. And some still say the House of Echoes sings back when the wind is right. Of course, colonialism didn't like any of this. Gender nonconformity was labeled unnatural. Mahu were mocked, policed, erased. In some regions, they were driven into hiding, forced to perform only in tourist shows, stripped of their sacred roles. But even then, they didn't disappear. They adapted. They kept singing, kept sleeping beside those who needed to feel whole. Because identity, once embodied, doesn't die. It rests, waits, re-emerges, stronger, more defiant. And the resurgence is happening now. Across Polynesia, the Mahu and Fa'afafine are reclaiming their spaces, not as curiosities, but as cultural pillars. They lead ceremonies, compose chants, host sleep rituals, and most importantly, they teach that love doesn't have a shape, that rest isn't earned by conformity, that sleep, in its purest form, is a return to the self beneath the masks. So tonight, as you lie down, ask yourself, what parts of you are still waiting to be sung to sleep? What names have you hidden under the mat, hoping no one would call them? And what would happen if someone did? Someone who doesn't care what you're called, only how you dream. Someone who sleeps beside you not because they need to, but because they see you. All of you. No questions, no categories. Just the soft echo of breath and the promise that you are, and have always been, enough. You wake up to the sound of something slithering. Not loud, just a subtle rustle across woven pandanus, like sand slipping through fingers. You freeze, blinking into the dim hut, heart quickening, but no one else stirs. Not the old man snoring near the door, not the two lovers breathing in rhythm beside the fire pit. Just you and the thing. There, at the edge of your mat, half in shadow, half in moonlight, is a lizard. No more than a hand's length, its skin iridescent and its black eyes locked onto yours like it knows something you don't. It tilts its head, doesn't move. You try not to blink. Not because you're afraid, but because you know instinctively this isn't just a lizard. It could be your grandmother, or a god, or an omen. You've heard the stories. Everyone has. That in Polynesia, animals didn't just exist. They arrived. Dream messengers, shape-shifting spirits, ancestors on errand duty, and lizards. They were the nosy ones. The watchers. The ones who crawled into your sleep and came back out wearing flesh. If one showed up near your mat, it meant something had changed, or was about to. This isn't superstition, it's spiritual physics. Everything alive carried mana, and some creatures carried it like a secret too big for their tiny frames. Your job was to pay attention, not to freak out, not to kill it, definitely not to trap it. You watched, you waited. You let it show you why it came, and when it finally scuttles off into the dark, vanishing under a basket of yams, you're left wondering, was it a sign, or was it someone? Either way, your dreams tonight will be strange. You feel it in your bones. Polynesian sleep wasn't just about rest, it was surveillance, in the gentlest, creepiest way. The spirits didn't knock. They slipped in, sometimes as wind, sometimes as birds, sometimes as an old dog curling up at your feet and breathing just like your dead uncle used to. One documented belief across multiple islands was that animals became the vehicles of ancestral dreams. They carried the message, sometimes literally. A pig might nudge a coconut into your hut while you slept. Wake up and find it, you'd know. Someone's trying to remind you to let go of something. A moth landing on your lips? Watch your words tomorrow. A crab circling your mat at dawn. A visitor is bringing gossip. But lizards were special, maybe because they could get so close, because they watched with that blank, ancient stare, because they blended in until suddenly they didn't. There's a tale from the Marquesas about a woman who kept dreaming of being followed. In the dream, a small green tail kept disappearing around corners. She told the village priestess, who just nodded. That night, they sang a chant of revelation over her mat. The next morning, a lizard lay curled in her hair. She was calm, said she understood now. She never said what she understood. just stopped crying every night. That was enough. Some people invited these visits, slept with banana leaves on their chest or sugarcane beside their pillow, gifts for the dream animals. Others tried to block them, slept in circles of salt, wore carved bone amulets shaped like shark's teeth. Not to hurt, just to guard. Because not all animal visitations were kind. A centipede crawling across your stomach meant betrayal. A snake, rare but possible on some islands, meant fertility, but also danger. And if you dreamt of being bitten, you needed cleansing, immediately. And yet, no one feared animals the way we do now. There was no scream and run instinct. There was watching. There was interpretation. There was respect. Because animals didn't interrupt sleep. They extended it. They pushed it out of the personal into the collective. You weren't just dreaming for yourself. You were dreaming on behalf of the village, of the past, of the gods. One elder used to say, "If the gecko falls on your belly, don't move. You're being kissed by your mistakes." And people believed her. They'd lie still, wait, think. And often what came next was clarity, maybe guilt, maybe relief, but always something. Let's talk about the rooster. Not the annoying sunrise squawker, but the midnight one. Because sometimes a rooster would crow in the dead of night, and that meant a soul had wandered too far in sleep. Someone's spirit was out there, lost, maybe not planning to come back. And the rooster? He wasn't just announcing it. He was calling it home. A wake-up call for the soul, not the body. That's why no one silenced those birds, even when they broke the sacred hush of the sleeping hut. They were guardians, announcers, loud little lifeguards for the dream realm. One true and almost unbelievable story from missionary archives. A woman once woke up screaming, convinced her husband had been taken in his sleep. Everyone said it was nerves. She insisted it was the dog, said it sat beside him all night, growling low, then licked his face just as dawn broke. Hours later, the man collapsed. Fever. Hallucinations. He claimed he'd been drowning in dreams. Something had pulled him back. It smelled like dog fur, he said, and firewood. The dog died that week. Old age, maybe. Or maybe it had done its job. No one ever replaced it. So what do you do when you wake and find an animal watching you sleep? You speak, softly. "I see you," is enough. If it's an ancestor, they'll know you're listening. If it's a spirit, they'll know you're respectful. If it's a curious gecko, well, maybe it just likes your breath. Either way, don't brush it off. Don't swat it away. Because maybe it's carrying something. A dream not meant for you, or one meant only for you. Tonight, as you sleep, pay attention to the quiet shuffles, the gentle flutters, the paws, claws, hooves, or scales that drift through the dark. You are not alone. You never were. The ancestors walk beside you, but sometimes they crawl. You're lying in a bed you haven't shared in weeks. The pillow still smells like them. The blanket's heavy, too heavy, like it's holding a silence neither of you wants to break. Outside, the waves are calm, but inside, the air hums with tension. The kind of stillness that only exists between people who used to touch without thinking and now flinch without meaning to. Welcome to one of the most overlooked, misunderstood, and strangely beautiful sleep rituals in Polynesia. Ritual separation. Nights apart. On purpose. With rules. With rhythm. With longing as a spiritual practice. See, in a culture where sleep was sacred and sensuality was interwoven with daily life, sometimes the most powerful thing two lovers could do was not share a mat. Not to punish. To build tension. To recalibrate. To remember. Lovers, spouses, even newlyweds would undergo periods of ceremonial distance, not forever, just long enough to let the ache become part of the desire again. And not just sexual desire, emotional craving, soul thirst. The kind you only feel when you sleep alone and still feel the imprint of their back against yours. This wasn't a breakup, it was a ritual pause, and it was used for all kinds of reasons. A couple had argued too fiercely? Sleep apart. Not as punishment, but as protection. From each other, from themselves, from the spirits who were always listening. A woman had recently given birth. The man would sleep in another hut for a time, not to avoid her, but to give her body space to heal, her spirit time to reconnect with itself. And sometimes, separation wasn't about conflict or fatigue, it was about preparation. Before a big ceremony or voyage, couples would choose to sleep apart to build spiritual energy. To let dreams speak louder in solitude, to stoke hunger into clarity. But oh, when they came back together, fire. Reconnection wasn't casual. It was ceremonial. The reunion was often timed with the moon, or with a festival, or even with a shared dream. That's right. If two people dreamt of each other on the same night, they'd consider it a sign. The separation had served its purpose. The craving had aligned their spirits again. Let me tell you a real story, passed down through oral tradition, now buried in a footnote somewhere. Two lovers, deeply in love, almost dangerously so, began to dream of fire. Not shared warmth, but destruction. One dreamt the other was burning, the other dreamt of flames around their hut. When they confessed, an elder advised a cooling ritual. "Sleep apart," she said, "until the water returns." They did. For 7 nights, they slept in separate spaces, chanted separately, bathed separately. On the 8th night, they both dreamt of rain. That night, they reunited. That reunion became a story. Then a song. That song is still sung, low, slow, with a beat like falling water. Fringe detail. In some islands, during these separation periods, lovers would send gifts across the sleeping space. Not flowers, not food. Dreams. One would whisper a chant into a carved gourd, then place it near the other's pillow. The gourd wasn't opened or touched. It was simply accepted, slept beside. And in the morning, if the recipient woke with warmth or clarity or tears, they'd know the message had arrived. No need for conversation, just breath, just knowing. And sometimes people didn't come back together. The dreams didn't align. The space grew wider. That was okay, too. These cultures understood that not all separations are failures. Some are transitions. Some are releases. Some are quiet thank you notes written in the language of goodbye. But most of the time, they came back. And when they did, they didn't just pick up where they left off. They started again. New mats, new oil, new chants. You never walk back into love the same person. And when you've dreamed alone for long enough, even the sound of someone else's breathing beside you can feel like a hymn. There's a recorded ritual from Tonga where lovers reunite by sitting back to back, eyes closed, knees just barely touching. They stay like that for 10 minutes, breathing, no talking, just listening to each other's silence. When the time's right, one will reach back and hold the other's hand. That's it. That's the signal. They're ready to lie down together again. No grand declarations, no scripted apologies, just shared stillness, shared sleep, shared surrender. Think of that next time someone tells you distance is dangerous. In Polynesia, distance was a tool, a space between notes that lets the song breathe. And dreams? Dreams were the letters lovers sent when touch wasn't possible. One woman dreamt of her partner dancing alone on a cliff, arms open. She told no one. The next day, he arrived home from a journey, arms open, smiling. Same gesture, same rhythm. They'd been dreaming in sync. That night, they didn't speak. They just curled up like they'd never left. And in the quiet, That cliff danced between them. So tonight, if you're lying alone, don't rush to fill the space. Let it echo a little. Let it ache. That ache is holy. That ache is memory, promise, and invitation. And if you dream of someone, if they show up in the quiet, smiling or crying or silent, whisper their name. Not to wake them, just to tell the dream. I'm still here. You close your eyes, finally, after everything. After the songs and the separations, the tattoos, the spirits, the lovers who left and the lizards who watched. You lie there in the warm hush of a Polynesian night that feels impossibly ancient and yet closer than your own skin. The moon is swollen, casting silver lines through the woven roof, and the ocean exhales in the distance like a tired god. And that's when you feel it. Sleep, not as escape, not as fatigue, but as arrival. Not something that happens to you, something you step into. Because for Polynesians, sleep was never just sleep. It was a sacred theater, a living stage, a place where gods flirted with mortals, where ancestors whispered warnings in riddles, where the body softened and the soul walked freely. It was not passive. It was not private. It was a rite of passage repeated every night. Every yawn, every mat, every breath was part of a script older than the language used to tell it. The act of sleeping beside someone was not incidental. It was a performance. You wrapped yourself in tapa not for warmth, but to honor the body beneath it. You laid your head beside a lover not to rest, but to dream together, to enter the same current, to test whether your spirits harmonized when your bodies weren't speaking. Even the way you turned your back or pressed your knees together carried meaning. Everything was choreography, even silence, especially silence. And if you were lucky or chosen, you didn't just dream. You hosted something, a visitation, a moment, a message wrapped in metaphor. You'd wake up and know the gods came tonight, or the ancestors, or the one who used to sing your name in the dark and now only hums it in sleep. You'd walk into the morning light changed. Not dramatically, just enough. Enough to choose the other mat. Enough to speak softer. Enough to light a candle for someone who hasn't come home. Historians still argue whether Polynesians truly believed in the literal travel of souls during sleep, or whether it was symbolic. But the people who lived it didn't need to argue. They just knew. Because their bodies remembered. Because the dreams came with smells and touches, and songs no one taught them. Because even now, centuries later, the rituals remain. Maybe not in the same forms, maybe not in the same huts, but in gestures, in lullabies, in the way someone turns over in bed and pauses, waiting for your breathing to match theirs. There's a concept in Polynesian thought called moemoea, a dream that's not just a dream, but a vision, a truth revealed through the sleep body. It doesn't come every night, but when it does, you feel it, in your gut, your teeth, your skin. You carry it with you like a tattoo no one can see. Some people never speak of their moemoea. They keep it close. Others sing it, or paint it, or sleep beside the ocean until it returns. Because it always does. Eventually. You just have to be quiet long enough, still enough, brave enough. And then there's the final layer. The secret no one writes down. The thing you've probably felt before but never named. That sleep, real sleep, is the moment you stop pretending. All the masks fall. The cleverness, the shame, the performance, gone. It's just you, and the breath, and the memories that won't let go, and the love that hasn't left, and the future trying to sneak in through the cracks. Sleep is rehearsal. For what you need to feel, for what you don't yet know how to say, for the version of you that's still growing, still aching, still dancing under some metaphorical moon waiting to be seen. And that's what Polynesian sleep rituals were always preparing you for. Not just good rest, but real presence. Not just connection with others, but with the self that only emerges in the dark. You wake up changed not because of what happened while you slept, but because of what your spirit did while you finally got out of the way. So tonight, as you lie there in your own modern bed, with your phone face down and your door half closed, remember this: your sleep is not just recovery. It's ceremony. It's memory. It's legacy. You are part of a lineage of sleepers, lovers, dreamers, story bearers. Your breath, tonight, is a chant. Your blanket is your tapa. Your body is worthy. Your rest is holy. And if you dream of someone, of something, of a place you've never been but feel like you belong to, let it come. Let it unfold. Let it whisper to you what all those Polynesian nights were trying to teach: that sleep is not the end, it's the entrance. To yourself, to each other, to everything we've forgotten how to hold in daylight. The moon is lower now, its glow soft and stretched across the floor like someone pulled the light into a blanket just for you. Outside, the waves no longer crash. They sigh. The breeze nudges through the open weave of the hut walls, not to cool you, but to rock you gently toward that last threshold. You've walked with spirits tonight, kissed memory on the cheek, laughed with gods. You've swum in stories that soaked you to the bone without ever touching water. And now, there's nothing more to do. Just breathe. Let your hands relax. Let your jaw release. Let the hum of old lullabies you don't quite remember cradle the parts of you still learning how to rest. Whatever you carried into tonight can wait. Whatever aches, whatever questions, whatever longing, it's been heard. It's being held. By ancestors, by ocean, by the invisible arms of dreams who know your name, even if you've forgotten it. You're safe now, seen, still, floating. The theater of sleep waits. Your spirit knows the way. Let go. Let go. Let go. End of script. Sweet dreams.